Hi, this is Bruce McConnell with Locomotive Systems Training. Welcome back. As you can see, we're still in the FRA, Federal Railroad Administration, general requirements. Now we're going to be talking still about handbrakes. Handbrakes are so vitally important. It's just deserves this to have this attention given to it. Again, Part 232.103, train brake systems. Handbrakes. That's right. Handbrakes are part of the train braking system. And this is LSTV-028. Okay, so here we go. All right, Part 223.103, general requirements for all train braking systems. And, I know there's a whole bunch of other stuff, but right now I want to focus just on the handbrakes. Securement of unattended equipment. A train's air brake shall not be depended upon to hold equipment standing unattended on a grade, including a locomotive, a car, or a train, whether or not the locomotive is attached. For purposes of this section, unattended equipment means left standing and unmanned in such a manner that the brake system of the equipment cannot be readily controlled by a qualified person. Unattended equipment shall be secured in accordance with the following requirements. Number 1, a sufficient number of handbrakes shall be applied to hold the equipment. There you go. Railroad shall develop and implement a process or procedure to verify that the applied handbrakes will sufficiently hold the equipment with the air brakes released. In other words, when they stop that equipment and they're going to walk away from it unattended, they're assuming that the air brakes will for whatever reason not be available, they'll bleed off, they won't be, and they're going to rely strictly on the handbrakes of the either locomotive or locomotive and cars to hold that equipment in place from rolling away. That's what that says right there. Okay, number 2, except for equipment connected to a source of compressed air, that is locomotive or ground air source, prior to leaving the equipment unattended, the brake pipe shall be reduced to 0 at a reduction in the brake pipe vented to atmosphere by leaving the angle cock in the open position in the first unit of the equipment left unattended. Okay, so what's going to happen is, and it says right here, the brake pipe vented to atmosphere by leaving, let me back up. The brake pipe shall be reduced to 0 at a reduction, and the brake pipe vented to atmosphere by leaving the angle cock in the open position. Okay, so what they're going to do, they're going to take the automatic brake valve handle, move it all the way over to handle off, and they're going to bleed brake pipe all the way down to 0, which would literally effectively, with brake pipe at 0, it's going to give us the maximum braking effort on every locomotive and every car in that train. That's what this statement is saying. And by having the angle cock in the open position on the first unit of the equipment left unattended, that will assure that brake pipe remains at 0, and if it does, then the maximum braking application of that locomotive and car can be applied and hopefully maintained. Okay, let's go to the next one. Number 3, except for distributed power units, the following requirements apply to unattended locomotives. All handbrakes shall be fully applied on all locomotives in the lead consist of an unattended train. There it is, black and white, ladies and gentlemen. Tells you right there, if you got a 5-unit consist, I'm setting the handbrakes on all 5 locomotives securely. Okay? If I have 3, it's going to be 3. If it's 1, it's 1. If it's 10, it's 10. Double I, all handbrakes shall be fully applied on all locomotives in an unattended consist outside of yard limits. So if I got a locomotive consist somewhere and it's not in the yard, again, I'm going to make sure that all handbrakes on that consist are applied. 1 unit, one handbrake. 3 handbrakes. 10 handbrakes. Very specific. Triple I, at a minimum, the handbrake shall be fully applied on the lead locomotive and an unattended locomotive consist within yard limits. So if a locomotive is in yard limits or in the yard, they're requiring a minimum of 1 locomotive, which would be the first handbrake on the first locomotive, lead locomotive, in an unattended consist. Now, this practice, you can augment this. In other words, this is the FRA's minimum requirement. So they're saying, you're going to apply the brake fully on the lead locomotive. Well, your company may want to have it on all 3, if it was 3 unit, or 5, or 10, or whatever. Remember, this is just the minimum requirement by the Federal Railroad Administration. So sometimes some companies will exceed that regulation for safety purposes. 4. One out of 4. A railroad shall develop, adopt, and comply with procedures for securing any unattended locomotive required to have a handbrake applied pursuant to paragraph N3 and I through N3 triple three or triple I, when the locomotive is not equipped with an operative handbrake. So if I got a locomotive with an inoperative handbrake, I have to augment that brake application with other locomotives to make sure that equipment doesn't move. Let's go to the next one. Number 4, a railroad shall adopt and comply with the process or procedures to verify with the process or procedures to verify that the applied handbrakes will sufficiently hold an unattended locomotive consist. A railroad shall also adopt and comply with instructions to address throttle position. That's really important. Status of the reverse lever. That's really important. Position of the generator field switch. That's go or no go. Status of the independent brakes. Okay. Position of the isolation switch and position of the automatic brake valve on unattended locomotives. The procedures and instructions required in this paragraph shall take into account winter weather conditions as they relate to throttle position and reverser handle. So, whole lot of stuff we got to look at on that concept, well, either single locomotive, consist, or even on a train. I mean, let's take a look at that back. Let's go back for just a second. You know, throttle position. Idle to throttle 8. Which one is it? I'm thinking probably closer to idle. Status of the reverser. Is it forward, centered, or reverse? You know, position of the generator field switch. That generator field switch, we want it off. Status of the independent brakes. Depending on what requirements are, you might have to apply the independent brakes as well. Isolation switch. Is it isolate, run, or other? Okay. Probably going to want it to be an isolate. And the automatic brake valve on all unattended locomotives. We want to make sure, at minimum, that we have probably a full service rate reduction from what they're saying here, with the brake pipe being reduced to 0. That's the maximum brake application you can get. Winter weather does affect air brakes. Also, the throttle position can affect with these new modern locomotives that have computers. The computer itself will control how fast that locomotive idles based on outside temperature and conditions inside the locomotive. Some systems require to be kicked in, turned on, and so on and so forth. So, a lot of information here, and all that is designed to help assist securing that locomotive and or train from movement. Right here, FRA rules. All right, let's go to the next one. 232.105, general requirements for locomotives. A, the air brake equipment on a locomotive shall be in a safe and suitable condition for service. So let's take a look at it. Air brakes have to work, throttle has to work, generator field switch has to work, isolation switch, independent brake, automatic brake. They all have to be working properly. Otherwise, it's a violation. And we've already been through a lot of those. And trust me, there's a lot more that's in that Code of Federal Regulations. We're just giving you a little sample of it. B, all locomotives ordered on or after, there it is. Remember I was telling you that there's a certain date? Well, here it is. All locomotives ordered on or after August 1st, 2002 or placed in service for the first time on or after April 2nd, 2004. Look at that. Shall be. There's no vagueness or ambiguity there. Shall be equipped with a handbrake or parking brake that is 1. Capable of application or activation by hand. Capable of release by hand. And 3. Capable of holding a locomotive on a 3% grade. Okay, which means it's either going uphill or downhill wherever the locomotive is. So that locomotive, that handbrake has to hold that locomotive on a 3% grade. 3C, on locomotives so equipped, the handbrake or parking brake, as well as its parts or connections, shall be inspected and necessary repairs made as often as service requirements, but no less date of the last inspection shall be entered on the form FRA F 6180-49A, or what we call the blue card. That's the actual form number for the blue card on a locomotive, or suitably stenciled or tagged on the locomotive. So the FRA wants a record of the handbrake, whether it be a handbrake or a parking brake. A handbrake, you use your hand to tighten it and loosen it. A parking brake is something that is, you push a button and something spins and something moves. They serve the same function, but they are operated quite differently. And they all have their own requirements. All right, let's go ahead and go to the next one. Wow, That was a short and sweet one, but nonetheless, very, very important one. So once again, I want to remind you to take a look. Go to the website for the FRA. It's www.fra.dot, which is Department of Transportation.gov. Once again, www.fra.dot.gov. And also, when you get a chance, take a look at our website, lst-ca.com. Once again, lst-ca.com. Thanks for coming in, spending the time with us. Have a safe day, and we'll see you next week. Bye now.